In the quiet, picture-perfect suburb of Willow Creek, life seemed like something out of a storybook. The streets were lined with tall, shady trees that cast dappled sunlight onto freshly paved sidewalks. Every lawn was manicured to perfection, with flower beds bursting in vibrant colors and driveways gleaming from weekly power washes. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other across fences, kids rode their bikes until sunset, and weekend barbecues brought everyone together. At the heart of this idyllic community stood the Homeowners Association, HOA, an organization tasked with keeping Willow Creek looking pristine and running smoothly. Leading the HOA was Karen Whitmore, a woman whose name had become synonymous with order, discipline, and, depending on who you asked, sheer stubbornness. Karen was the type of person who noticed if someone's mailbox was slightly crooked or if a single weed dared to sprout between cracks in the sidewalk. She prided herself on maintaining standards, often saying, "If we don't enforce the rules, what's the point of having them?" To some residents, Karen was a hero. They appreciated her dedication to making Willow Creek the best version of itself. To others, though, she came off as overbearing. There were whispers about how she once fined a family for painting their front door a shade of blue not approved by the HOA color palette. Another time, she sent a strongly worded letter to a homeowner because their Halloween decorations stayed up past November 1st. While these incidents might have seemed trivial to outsiders, they were enough to make Karen both admired and feared. Within the neighborhood, Karen's leadership style wasn't just limited to enforcing minor regulations. She had grand visions for Willow Creek, dreaming of ways to elevate its status even further. She spearheaded initiatives to install solar-powered streetlights, organized annual block parties to foster camaraderie, and even pushed for speed bumps to ensure children could play safely near the cul-de-sacs. Her efforts paid off. Property values soared, and Willow Creek became one of the most sought-after addresses in the area. But behind her polished demeanor lay a more complicated side, one that few people truly understood. Despite her outward confidence, Karen harbored insecurities. Deep down, she craved validation, constantly seeking approval from her peers and neighbors. This need for recognition sometimes blurred the line between doing what was right for the community and pursuing personal glory. Over time, her desire to leave a lasting legacy began to overshadow her initial intentions. What started as a passion for improving Willow Creek slowly morphed into something else entirely: an insatiable hunger for control. One particular feature of the neighborhood always gnawed at Karen: a vacant lot nestled at the edge of Willow Creek. Unlike the surrounding properties, which boasted sprawling homes with manicured gardens, this patch of land remained untouched. For decades, it belonged to an elderly couple who lived far away, but visited occasionally during holidays. The lot was nothing special, just a stretch of wild grass, a few scattered trees, and the occasional rabbit darting through the underbrush. To most residents, it blended into the background, barely noticeable amidst the hustle and bustle of daily life. But to Karen, it stuck out like a sore thumb. She saw it as an eyesore, a blemish on an otherwise flawless canvas. Every time she drove past it, her mind raced with ideas about how to transform it into something useful, or at least presentable. At first, she tried addressing the issue diplomatically, reaching out to the owners to propose solutions. Maybe they'd sell it to the HOA, or allow the association to beautify it. But the elderly couple politely declined each offer, explaining they had sentimental ties to the land and no plans to part with it. When the couple passed away unexpectedly a few years later, leaving the property in probate limbo, Karen saw an opportunity. With no clear heirs stepping forward, the lot sat abandoned, growing wilder by the month. To Karen, this felt like a ticking clock. If action wasn't taken soon, she feared the lot would attract litter, pests, or worse, become a magnet for troublemakers. In her mind, it wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a threat to the very fabric of Willow Creek. Her thoughts turned inward as she mulled over possible solutions. A communal park, perhaps, something that would benefit everyone while raising property values even higher. The idea took root in her mind, blossoming into a full-blown vision. She imagined families picnicking under shady trees, children playing on swings, and joggers looping around walking paths. It was a dream worth fighting for, or so she told herself. What Karen didn't realize, however, was that her fixation on the vacant lot would set off a chain reaction neither she nor anyone else in Willow Creek could have anticipated. Little did the residents know their peaceful neighborhood was about to be rocked by drama, deception, and scandal, all stemming from Karen's relentless pursuit of perfection. And as events unfolded, the true cost of ambition would come sharply into focus, changing lives forever. The vacant lot at the edge of Willow Creek had always been something of an enigma. To most residents, it was just a patch of land, overgrown with weeds, dotted with gnarled trees, and home to chirping birds and scampering squirrels. It wasn't particularly beautiful or ugly. It simply existed, blending into the background like an old piece of furniture you forget is there until someone points it out. But for Karen Whitmore, the mere sight of it sparked a visceral reaction. Every time she drove past, her jaw tightened and her hands gripped the steering wheel just a little harder. To her, the lot wasn't just empty. It was wasted potential. Karen's frustration wasn't entirely without merit. In a neighborhood as meticulously maintained as Willow Creek, the lot stood out like a missing tooth in an otherwise perfect smile. The grass grew wild and untamed, spilling onto the sidewalk in unruly clumps. Fallen leaves from the surrounding trees collected in heaps, creating soggy mounds that rotted away unnoticed. And then there were the rumors, whispers among neighbors about teenagers sneaking onto the property late at night, leaving behind beer cans and cigarette butts as evidence of their mischief. Whether true or not, these stories only fueled Karen's determination to take action. For years, the lot had belonged to an elderly couple named Harold and Margaret Dawson. They lived several states away, but visited Willow Creek twice a year to check on their property. During those brief visits, they would trim the grass, tidy up fallen branches, and sit quietly on folding chairs, reminiscing about the simpler times they'd spent there. To them, the lot wasn't just land. It was a cherished memory, a place where they'd planted dreams that never quite came to fruition. When they passed away within months of each other, the lot became part of their estate, left in limbo while lawyers sorted through probate proceedings. With no clear heirs stepping forward, the property languished, slowly reclaiming its natural state. For Karen, this period of uncertainty felt unbearable. Each passing month brought fresh waves of irritation as the lot continued to deteriorate. She tried contacting the Dawsons' lawyer multiple times, offering to purchase the property on behalf of the HOA or even lease it temporarily so it could be cleaned up. But every attempt ended in polite rejection. The lawyer explained that the lot couldn't be sold or altered until the probate process was complete, a process that dragged on interminably due to bureaucratic red tape. Frustrated but undeterred, Karen turned her attention inward, brainstorming ways to address the issue herself. She envisioned transforming the lot into a communal park, a project that would benefit the entire neighborhood while also boosting property values. Picture this, she thought. Lush green lawns dotted with flower beds, winding walking paths shaded by mature trees, and benches where neighbors could gather to chat or watch their children play. It was a noble idea, one that aligned perfectly with her mission to enhance Willow Creek's appeal. She imagined how proud she'd feel standing at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, basking in the gratitude of her fellow residents. But as Karen delved deeper into her plans, cracks began to form in her reasoning. Her motivations weren't purely altruistic. Beneath her polished exterior lay a simmering desire for recognition, a need to cement her legacy as the woman who single-handedly elevated Willow Creek to new heights. Transforming the lot into a park wasn't just about improving the community, it was about proving her worth, silencing critics, and securing her place in the annals of Willow Creek history. To make matters worse, Karen's approach alienated some of her neighbors. At first, she sought input from the HOA board, presenting her vision during meetings and asking for feedback. But when others expressed concerns about transparency or questioned whether the project was truly necessary, Karen dismissed their objections with thinly veiled impatience. "We can't let perfection slip through our fingers," she declared. during one heated discussion. "If we wait too long, someone else might snatch it up, and then what? We'll have missed our chance." Her dismissive attitude rubbed people the wrong way. A few board members privately grumbled about her domineering leadership style, accusing her of prioritizing her own agenda over the community's best interests. Others worried about the financial burden such a project might impose on homeowners, already stretched thin by HOA fees. Still, Karen pressed on, convinced she was doing the right thing. She began drafting proposals, sketching designs, and researching contractors, all without official approval from the board. As weeks turned into months, Karen grew increasingly impatient. The probate process showed no signs of resolution, and the lot remained stubbornly untouched. Her frustration boiled over one evening after yet another fruitless phone call with the Dawsons' lawyer. Sitting alone in her kitchen, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and half-empty coffee cups, she made a decision. If the legal system wouldn't cooperate, she'd find another way. After all, she reasoned, the lot was practically abandoned. No one was using it. No one cared about it. Why should bureaucracy stand in the way of progress? That night, Karen hatched a plan, one that would soon spiral far beyond anything she could have anticipated. She started small, reaching out to local contractors under the guise of seeking estimates for future projects. She framed her inquiries casually, mentioning that the HOA might consider developing the lot once the probate process concluded. But behind the scenes, she was laying groundwork, gathering information, and testing the waters for what came next. By the time autumn rolled around, Karen's resolve had hardened into something unyielding. She convinced herself that drastic measures were justified, that the ends would ultimately justify the means. Unbeknownst to her neighbors, she began taking steps to seize control of the lot, bypassing official channels and sidestepping ethical boundaries. What started as a well-intentioned idea, to create a space everyone could enjoy, was morphing into something darker, driven by ambition and an insatiable need for validation. And so, as leaves turned golden and fell from the trees, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation. Little did Karen realize that her actions would unleash a chain reaction, exposing secrets, shattering trust, and forever changing the face of Willow Creek. For now, though, she remained blissfully unaware, caught in the grip of her own grand vision, blind to the storm brewing just over the horizon. It was a crisp autumn morning when the tranquility of Willow Creek was shattered by the deafening roar of heavy machinery. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the neighborhood as residents began their day. Some were sipping coffee in their kitchens, others walking their dogs along the quiet streets. But the peace was abruptly interrupted by the sound of engines revving and metal grinding against earth. Startled neighbors peeked out of their windows to see what was happening, and what they witnessed left them speechless. Dozens of bulldozers, dump trucks, and construction vehicles had descended upon the vacant lot like an invading army. They rumbled through the streets, leaving tire tracks on pristine asphalt and kicking up clouds of dust that settled on freshly washed cars. Workers in hard hats swarmed the property, cutting down trees, tearing up soil, and leveling the ground with ruthless efficiency. It was chaos, organized, methodical chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Word spread quickly. Residents poured out of their homes, clustering together in disbelief as they watched the destruction unfold. Mothers held toddlers in their arms, pointing at the commotion with wide eyes. Teenagers snapped photos on their phones, already posting updates to social media. Elderly couples leaned on canes, shaking their heads in confusion. Everyone wanted answers, but no one seemed to know who was behind this sudden invasion. That's when Karen Whitmore appeared, clipboard in hand, wearing her signature blazer and heels. Her presence commanded attention, even amidst the cacophony of machinery. With practiced calm, she approached the growing crowd, offering explanations before anyone could ask questions. "Good morning, everyone," she said brightly, her voice carrying over the noise. "I'm sure you're wondering what's going on here. Well, let me assure you, this is all part of a carefully planned initiative approved by the HOA board." Her words did little to quell the rising tide of anger and confusion. Neighbors bombarded her with questions. Who authorized this? Why wasn't the community consulted? What exactly was being built? Karen answered each query with rehearsed confidence, insisting that the project, a communal park funded by HOA dues, had received proper approval during recent meetings. She painted a picture of harmony and progress, describing how the new space would benefit families, increase property values, and elevate Willow Creek's status as a premier neighborhood. But not everyone bought her explanation. A few sharp-eyed residents noticed inconsistencies in her story. For one thing, many hadn't attended recent HOA meetings due to conflicting schedules or lack of interest. Others recalled heated debates about transparency and fairness surrounding the vacant lot. One particularly vocal homeowner, Greg Morrison, stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. "Karen," he demanded, "you're saying this was approved by the board? Because I don't remember signing off on anything like this." His accusation hung in the air, silencing the murmurs around him. Karen hesitated for a fraction of a second, but recovered quickly, flashing her trademark smile. "Greg, I understand your concerns," she replied smoothly. "These decisions require careful consideration and sometimes details get overlooked. But rest assured, everything has been handled according to protocol." Her tone was reassuring, almost patronizing, as if addressing a child throwing a tantrum. Unsatisfied, Greg turned to other board members standing nearby. "Is this true?" he asked pointedly. "Did we really approve this?" The board members exchanged uneasy glances, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of scrutiny. One by one, they admitted they hadn't seen any formal documentation authorizing such a massive undertaking. Another confessed they thought the discussion was still in the proposal stage. The cracks in Karen's facade were beginning to show as tensions escalated, tempers flared. Some residents shouted accusations while others pleaded for calm. A young mother holding her toddler looked close to tears, lamenting the loss of shade trees that once bordered the lot. An elderly man complained about the noise disturbing his morning routine. Even those who initially supported Karen's vision started to waver, questioning whether the ends justified the means. Amid the turmoil, one brave neighbor decided to take action. Sarah Bennett, a soft-spoken woman known for her meticulous record-keeping, quietly slipped away from the crowd. Back at her house, she retrieved copies of recent HOA meeting minutes, emails, and financial reports. Scanning through them, she discovered something alarming. There was no official vote approving the demolition. Worse still, funds earmarked for routine maintenance appeared to have been diverted to cover contractor fees. Armed with evidence, Sarah filed a formal complaint with local authorities, triggering an investigation into how the project came to be. News of the inquiry spread like wildfire, igniting outrage across Willow Creek. Residents who had previously tolerated Karen's micromanagement now viewed her with suspicion. Conversations buzzed with speculation about forged signatures, hidden agendas, and potential corruption. The once idyllic neighborhood felt tainted, its sense of trust fractured. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down, refusing to back down despite mounting pressure. She organized impromptu meetings to defend her actions, presenting charts and graphs to justify the project's necessity. She emphasized the benefits: a cleaner environment, safer spaces for children, increased property values, and dismissed dissenting voices as fearmongers resistant to change. Yet her arguments rang hollow, undermined by growing evidence of procedural irregularities. The situation reached a tipping point when investigators arrived, armed with subpoenas and search warrants. They combed through HOA records, interviewed board members, and inspected the partially demolished lot. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that Karen's grand vision had veered dangerously off course. What began as a well-meaning attempt to improve the community had spiraled into something far more sinister: a reckless power grab driven by ambition and ego. For the first time, Karen found herself on shaky ground. Her polished exterior cracked under the weight of scrutiny, revealing glimpses of vulnerability beneath. She spent sleepless nights poring over documents, rehearsing defenses, and scrambling to salvage her reputation. Friends distanced themselves, fearing guilt by association. Even her husband, Greg Whitmore, grew distant, unable to reconcile the woman he loved with the person unraveling before his eyes. And yet, despite the storm brewing around her, Karen refused to admit defeat. She clung to her belief that she was acting in the best interests of Willow Creek, convinced that history would vindicate her. But as bulldozers continued their relentless work and neighbors whispered behind closed doors, it became painfully obvious that her plan had gone horribly awry. The vacant lot, once a symbol of untapped potential, had become a battleground, a stark reminder of what happens when unchecked ambition collides with misplaced authority. What Karen failed to realize was that her actions had set off a chain reaction, one that would ripple far beyond the confines of Willow Creek. The seeds of doubt she planted among her neighbors would grow into demands for accountability, transparency, and justice. And as the investigation deepened, uncovering layers of deception and misconduct, Karen's world would crumble faster than the trees she'd ordered torn down. By the time the dust settled, nothing, not her reputation, not her relationships, not even her cherished vision, would remain untouched. The investigation into the demolition of the vacant lot quickly escalated from a local curiosity to a full-blown scandal, unraveling layers of deception that shocked even the most skeptical residents of Willow Creek. What began as a routine inquiry into procedural irregularities soon revealed a web of fraud, forgery, and greed so intricate it could have been ripped straight out of a crime thriller. At first, authorities focused on the basics, verifying whether Karen Whitmore had followed proper protocols in authorizing the project. Investigators reviewed HOA meeting minutes, financial records, and communication logs, searching for evidence of official approval. But the deeper they dug, the more glaring the discrepancies became. It didn't take long for them to uncover emails showing that Karen had bypassed standard procedures entirely, fabricating documents and falsifying signatures to push her agenda forward. One particularly damning piece of evidence came in the form of a forged board resolution. The document, purportedly signed by all members of the HOA board, outlined plans for the park's development and authorized the use of emergency funds to hire contractors. However, when investigators compared the signatures to those on file, it became clear they were forgeries, crudely imitated and inconsistent with the originals. Worse still, several board members confirmed they had never seen or approved the document, let alone signed it. As if that weren't enough, investigators discovered that Karen had diverted thousands of dollars from the HOA's budget to cover contractor fees. Money earmarked for routine maintenance, things like fixing potholes, repairing streetlights, and repainting playground equipment, had been siphoned off without anyone noticing. How had she managed to pull this off? By exploiting loopholes in the HOA's accounting system, submitting vague invoices labeled miscellaneous expenses, and burying the costs among legitimate expenditures. To the untrained eye, everything seemed above board. But to forensic accountants, the trail was glaringly obvious. But the revelations didn't stop there. As investigators widened their scope, they uncovered something far more sinister. Karen's secret negotiations with a high-profile developer named Victor Langston. Emails obtained through subpoenas revealed a chilling exchange between the two, detailing a plan to transform the lot into a luxury housing complex rather than the promised communal park. According to the correspondence, Karen intended to sell the land to Langston after completing the demolition, pocketing a hefty commission in exchange for brokering the deal. In one email, Karen boasted about how easy it would be to manipulate the HOA's bylaws to justify the sale. Once the lot is cleared, no one will question its new purpose, far as she wrote. We'll frame it as progress, a win-win for everyone. Another message included a detailed breakdown of payment terms, with Langston agreeing to pay Karen 15% of the property's final value once construction began. The sheer audacity of the scheme left investigators stunned and infuriated. What made matters worse was Karen's attempt to bribe city officials to fast-track permits for the demolition. Text messages showed her offering cash payments and other incentives to expedite approvals, circumventing months of red tape. While none of the officials accepted her bribes, some even reported her to ethics committees, The mere fact that she'd tried underscored the extent of her desperation and corruption. As news of these findings spread, outrage rippled through Willow Creek. Residents who had once tolerated Karen's micromanagement now viewed her as a villain. Conversations buzzed with disbelief and betrayal. How could someone entrusted with leading their community stoop so low? For many, the answer lay in Karen's insatiable ambition. Her desire to leave a legacy, one that immortalized her name in the annals of Willow Creek history, had blinded her to the ethical boundaries she crossed along the way. The media caught wind of the story, turning it into a national spectacle. Headlines blared phrases like HOA president embroiled in fraud scandal and suburban queenpin faces charges over park plot. Reporters camped outside Karen's house, snapping photos and hounding her for interviews. Talk shows debated whether stricter regulations were needed to prevent similar abuses of power in homeowners associations across America. Social media lit up with memes mocking Karen, dubbing her HOA Karen, and turning her into a symbol of unchecked authority, gone awry. Amid the chaos, alliances within Willow Creek began to shift. Longtime friends distanced themselves from Karen, fearing guilt by association. Board members who had stood by her side now condemned her actions, eager to distance themselves from the fallout. Even her husband, Greg Whitmore, found himself questioning his loyalty. He moved out temporarily, claiming he needed space to process everything. In a handwritten note left on the kitchen counter, he wrote, "I can't condone what you've done, Karen. I hope you find a way to make things right." Isolated and desperate, Karen fought back the only way she knew how, by doubling down on her narrative. She held a press conference outside her home, flanked by an expensive team of lawyers hired to defend her against mounting charges. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, she addressed reporters with practiced calm, insisting that every decision she made was in the best interest of the community. Yes, mistakes were made, she admitted, her voice steady but tinged with defensiveness. But my intentions were pure. This park was meant to bring joy and unity to Willow Creek, not divide us. Her words fell flat. Instead of quelling criticism, the press conference only fueled further backlash. Journalists grilled her relentlessly, pointing out inconsistencies in her story and demanding answers she couldn't provide. When asked directly about the emails linking her to Victor Langston, Karen stammered, visibly rattled. Those messages were taken out of context, she claimed, though her explanation lacked conviction. The audience watched as cracks appeared in her polished facade, revealing glimpses of vulnerability beneath. Back in Willow Creek, tempers continued to flare. Neighbors gathered in living rooms and coffee shops, venting their frustrations and sharing theories about Karen's motives. Some speculated that jealousy drove her, that she envied the success of developers like Langston and wanted a taste of their wealth. Others believed she craved validation, using the project as a means to assert dominance over her peers. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Karen's actions had shattered the trust that held the community together. Meanwhile, under new leadership, the HOA scrambled to address the fallout. A temporary president was appointed to rebuild confidence among residents, promising transparency and accountability moving forward. Plans for the vacant lot shifted dramatically. Instead of a luxury housing complex or a grand park, the community decided to create a small garden maintained by volunteers. Fundraisers were organized, donations poured in, and neighbors worked side by side to plant flowers, install benches, and erect a plaque honoring the Dawsons, the original owners of the land. For Karen, the consequences were severe. Authorities formally charged her with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and misuse of funds. Prosecutors argued that her actions constituted criminal enterprise activity, given the scale and premeditation of her scheme. Facing mounting legal fees, Karen drained her savings to pay for her defense, leaving her financially strained and emotionally exhausted. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Karen refused to accept responsibility. Convinced she could win in court, she rejected plea deals and prepared for trial. Her lawyers crafted elaborate arguments, painting Her as a misunderstood visionary whose methods may have been flawed, but whose intentions remained noble. Whether this strategy would sway a jury remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the upcoming trial would determine not just Karen's fate, but also the future of Willow Creek itself. As autumn gave way to winter, the neighborhood braced for what lay ahead. Snow blanketed the partially demolished lot, muffling the sounds of construction that had once dominated daily life. Residents hung wreaths on their doors and strung lights along rooftops, trying to recapture the warmth and charm that had defined Willow Creek before the scandal. Yet beneath the festive decorations lingered an undeniable tension, a collective awareness that their community had changed forever, and at the center of it all stood Karen Whitmore, a woman whose relentless pursuit of perfection had spiraled into ruin. Once celebrated as a guardian of order, she now faced the possibility of prison time, public disgrace, and irreparable damage to her relationships. Her story served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that ambition, unchecked by integrity, can lead to devastating consequences. For Willow Creek, the road to healing would be long and difficult, but it was a journey they vowed to undertake together, united by a shared determination to rebuild trust and restore harmony. As the scandals surrounding Karen Whitmore continued to unfold, the once unshakable foundation of trust that held Willow Creek together began to crumble. The revelation of her fraudulent activities and unethical behavior sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents grappling with feelings of betrayal, anger, and disillusionment. But perhaps the most painful blow for Karen wasn't the legal charges or media scrutiny. It was the loss of support from those closest to her. Allies who had once stood by her side turned against her, exposing secrets and compounding her downfall. First, Karen tried to rally her inner circle, seeking solace in familiar faces. She reached out to friends on the HOA board, hoping to explain herself and win back their loyalty. "You know me," she pleaded during one particularly tense phone call. "You know I wouldn't do anything to hurt this neighborhood." But her words fell on deaf ears. Board members, many of whom had initially admired her dedication, now saw her as a manipulator whose actions had jeopardized the entire community. One by one, they distanced themselves, refusing to answer her calls or respond to her texts. Among those who abandoned her was Linda Harper, a longtime friend and former confidant. For years, Linda had been Karen's staunchest supporter, defending her against critics and helping her navigate difficult decisions. But when investigators approached Linda with questions about Karen's dealings, she hesitated before finally spilling what she knew. Over coffee at a local cafe, Linda recounted a conversation where Karen bragged about flipping real estate deals. She said it was easy money, Linda told authorities, her voice trembling with guilt. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, I wish I'd said something sooner." Another key figure who turned whistleblower was Tom Reynolds, a contractor hired to oversee the demolition of the vacant lot. Initially reluctant to cooperate, Tom eventually agreed to testify after being granted immunity. During interviews, he revealed incriminating details about Karen's secret meetings with Victor Langston, the high-profile developer implicated in the scheme. According to Tom, Karen instructed him to falsify invoices and mislabel expenses to conceal the true cost of the project. "She kept telling me not to worry," Tom recalled. "She said no one would notice, that everything would work out fine. But looking back, I realize I was just a pawn in her game." The betrayal cut deep, isolating Karen further as the investigation intensified. Even Greg Whitmore, her husband of 15 years, grew distant, unable to reconcile the woman he loved with the person unraveling before his eyes. At first, Greg tried to stand by her, offering emotional support and accompanying her to meetings with lawyers. But as more evidence emerged, painting an increasingly damning picture of Karen's misconduct, Greg found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about her. Late one night, while Karen slept fitfully in their bed, Greg packed a suitcase and quietly left the house. He moved into a small apartment downtown, leaving behind only a handwritten note. "I can't condone what you've done, Karen. I hope you find a way to make things right." Karen woke up the next morning to an empty bedroom and the weight of Greg's absence pressing down on her chest. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to cry, not tears of frustration or indignation, but raw, unfiltered grief. She had always prided herself on her strength, her ability to weather any storm. Yet now, stripped of allies and stripped of dignity, she felt utterly alone. Friends stopped inviting her to gatherings. Neighbors avoided eye contact when passing her on the street. Even her favorite barista at the local coffee shop seemed hesitant to serve her, mumbling apologies about being too busy whenever Karen walked in. Desperate to salvage her reputation, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She organized another press conference determined to present her side of the story directly to the public. Standing outside her home, flanked by her team of lawyers, she addressed reporters with practiced calm, insisting that every decision she made was motivated by love for Willow Creek. Yes, mistakes were made, she admitted, her voice steady, but tinged with defensiveness. But my intentions were pure. This park was meant to bring joy and unity to our community, not divide us. Her words, however well rehearsed, failed to resonate. Instead of quelling criticism, the press conference only fueled further backlash. Journalists grilled her relentlessly, pointing out inconsistencies in her story and demanding answers she couldn't provide. When asked directly about the emails linking her to Victor Langston, Karen stammered, visibly rattled. Those messages were taken out of context, she claimed. Though her explanation lacked conviction, the audience watched as cracks appeared in her polished facade, revealing glimpses of vulnerability beneath. Back in Willow Creek, tempers continued to flare. Neighbors gathered in living rooms and coffee shops, venting their frustrations and sharing theories about Karen's motives. Some speculated that jealousy drove her, that she envied the success of developers like Langston and wanted a taste of their wealth. Others believed she craved validation, using the project as a means to assert dominance over her peers. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Karen's actions had shattered the trust that held the community together. Amid the chaos, new leadership emerged within the HOA. A temporary president was appointed to rebuild confidence among residents, promising transparency and accountability moving forward. Under this fresh direction, plans for the vacant lot shifted dramatically. Instead of a luxury housing complex or a grand park, the community decided to create a small garden maintained by volunteers. Fundraisers were organized, donations poured in, and neighbors worked side by side to plant flowers, install benches, and erect a plaque honoring the Dawsons, the original owners of the land. For Karen, the consequences were severe. Authorities formally charged her with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and misuse of funds. Prosecutors argued that her actions constituted criminal enterprise activity, given the scale and premeditation of her scheme. Facing mounting legal fees, Karen drained her savings to pay for her defense, leaving her financially strained and emotionally exhausted. Her once immaculate home fell into disrepair, untouched flower beds wilting under neglect. The woman who had once obsessed over perfection now struggled to maintain even basic appearances. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Karen refused to accept responsibility. Convinced she could win in court, she rejected plea deals and prepared for trial. Her lawyers crafted elaborate arguments painting her as a misunderstood visionary, whose methods may have been flawed, but whose intentions remained noble. Whether this strategy would sway a jury remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. The upcoming trial would determine not just Karen's fate, but also the future of Willow Creek itself. As autumn gave way to winter, the neighborhood braced for what lay ahead. Snow blanketed the partially demolished lot, muffling the sounds of construction that had once dominated daily life. Residents hung wreaths on their doors and strung lights along rooftops, trying to recapture the warmth and charm that had defined Willow Creek before the scandal. Yet beneath the festive decorations lingered an undeniable tension, a collective awareness that their community had changed forever. And at the center of it all stood Karen Whitmore, a woman whose relentless pursuit of perfection had spiraled into ruin. Once celebrated as a guardian of order, She now faced the possibility of prison time, public disgrace, and irreparable damage to her relationships. Her story served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that ambition, unchecked by integrity, can lead to devastating consequences. For Willow Creek, the road to healing would be long and difficult, but it was a journey they vowed to undertake together, united by a shared determination to rebuild trust and restore harmony.